Today, we are honored to have Jessie Zollinger, Client Operations Director for IT Services at B Technologies, joining us to really explore the powerful tool of leadership, emotional intelligence. Jessie has mastered the art of creating authentic connections and really driving meaningful change. She believes that empathy, trust, meaningful conversations are really the cornerstones to a great leadership. Now, her insights today will help us understand how emotional intelligence can really transform leadership and business success. So, Jessie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Allie. I'm happy to be here.
Now, let's go ahead and jump in. What inspired you to explore the emotional intelligence as a critical factor in leadership and overall business success?
Yeah, that's a great question. The exploration of emotional intelligence, I would say, probably started for me way before I even had words for what to call it. I've always been a very curious person. People who know me probably can just pick up on this naturally, but as a kid, I was constantly asking questions, like why this, why that, what if this, what if that? Just like, I don't know, I feel like I've always just looked at the world with so much wonder. And people are no different. And people really set the tone for how you perceive the world. And so even from a young age, I was just like wondering why people did the things that they did. And as I got older, that juvenile curiosity turned into a deep personal academic study. And I don't know, it's just gone from there, even to the point when I was figuring out what master's degree to get. I got leadership and team building, because again, what builds relationships, what drives a group of people, not just in a workspace, but just in general, together or apart. And so it really just came out of that. And in the professional sector, I feel like that lens has always been something that's guided me to think about my relationships and my clients and my coworkers and just how everything is interconnected. And anyway, I'm a big nerd about it. I get very excited, but it's always something that kind of drives me as a person.
No, and that's really inspiring. And I think that those tools can really be used in anything, not just business, which is great.
Yeah.
So I think understanding that why behind your focus on emotional intelligence sets the stage perfectly. Now let's just dig in a little deeper into the mechanics of this concept. Could you break down the four core elements of emotional intelligence and really explain how they directly impact business outcomes?
Sure. So anytime we think about any social setting, we have ourselves and others, and then somewhere floating between that are those biases, like perceptions that dictate how we interpret that information. And so the four competencies are really based on that. Our cognitive awareness of how we relate to the world and to other people. And so those four pillars specifically are self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. And I really encourage people to even like look into this on their own or go to my white paper, because there's a diagram that makes it really easy to understand. And it helps you understand how, when it comes to yourself and others, your own awareness of self is going to dictate for you understanding of your own strengths and weaknesses, which will then inform how do I then think and show up? What is dictating how I behave in X, Y, and Z situation? And then add to that the component where now you're relating that awareness of self to your awareness of others, and that social awareness, which comes down to, do I accurately perceive you as a person? And am I meeting that feedback that I'm getting from you with empathy and understanding? And again, that word that I'll probably say a bazillion times during this interview, curiosity, And honestly, it's so hard, but inside of that, without bias, because that's impossible. Let's just make that really clear. It's impossible to interpret data without bias. But again, that self-awareness and being aware, okay, I've had this experience in the past, which is going to bias me to thinking about this. How can I then approach this person with grace and with empathy, and in a way that doesn't assume intent? And anyway,
Yeah.
I'm getting so caught up on those first two, but the third one, self-management, is how you regulate your emotions, as well as the last one, relationship management. How do you then nurture and take care of your relationships, which in the business setting loops us into things like, how do I extend mentorship? How do I extend leadership? How do I show up in those spaces? I know that was a lot of information, but kind of looping back into them specifically from a business aspect, your self-awareness is going to do a lot to dictate your personal decision making and your leadership efforts, how you approach things, even to the point your ability to delegate. Like, think about people who've always been taught through their own feedback of their environment, you're on your own. Those leaders tend to kind of take on everything themselves and not always delegate to their team. And being self-aware of that, you can extend this beautiful vulnerability to be like, hey, I tend to do this. And because I trust you and my team, call me on it. There's respectful ways to just create that kind of balance. And self-awareness, again, loops back into better customer service, better team understanding, just a better ability to extend grace to the people around you and to serve them better. And then, of course, the last one, relationship management. We all know what it feels like to work in a space where there's poor teamwork, poor collaboration. And I hope we all haven't had nightmare experiences like I know I have, but we know what it feels like. There's a feeling of tension, lack of safety, like you don't want to voice your opinions. And so in the business setting, good relationship management feels like people feeling comfortable to bring new ideas to the table, that it's safe to, mess up and learn from those moments versus feeling like, oh, I did it now. Like, that's it, one strike and I'm out. And so it can only nurture your business in any way to have a core focus that is people and relationships and how to flex that emotional intelligence muscle inside of that space.
I mean, I definitely agree with everything that you said, and the breakdown was really inspiring. You can tell that you do have a lot of passion behind this
I
too.
do.
So I know the readers and listeners definitely appreciate that insight and to really how these elements interconnect with business success. Now, for some of those leaders who may not yet have those skills mastered, where
Yeah.
would they begin?
Well, and the first thing I do want to start with is just a little fact that is, even if you don't feel like you're at a deficit or haven't explored this, every single leader needs to be thinking about this because we're in a global decline for this. So even if you think, oh, I don't need to worry about this, you need to at least look into it with some curiosity.
Well, and I think a good thing that you said is self-reflection. And I think
Yes.
with any type of growth, you need to reflect what's going on so then you can not only help yourself, but the people around you.
Yeah.
Now, in today's global business environment, emotional intelligence isn't just the only factor to consider nowadays.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the role of cultural intelligence and really how that complements emotional intelligence in a global business setting like how we are today.
Sure. And again, it comes down to being curious. And one of the most dangerous things that we can ever do, regardless of what context we're in, we could be in our hometown, is to assume that everybody thinks the same way we do. And, we talk about that as in the psychology sphere as egocentrism. It's the belief that everyone thinks and operates the same exact way that you do. And so many times, I'm sure you've experienced this too, Allie. You'll be in a setting and somebody will say something just mildly judgmental, assuming everybody in the space feels the same way about that thing. And meanwhile, you're over there like, wait, I like that thing. And so you're now in this awkward position to either be the odd man out or to just speak up and potentially make someone feel embarrassed. And so it just creates an odd tension. And the more that we can steer away from that, the better. But when it comes to cultures, there's so many traditions, so many base human operation protocols that are different from us. And really the big thing is do some research. Be curious. I know this sounds like such a copy paste answer from the one above that, but be curious and ask questions. There's ways to ask questions that are extremely respectful. One more small thing that I was going to say, when it comes to global spaces, it's very important when it comes to global EQ and cultural quotient, merging those two together, that you take the time to find first off a credible source and just get a small list of, okay, these are the things to absolutely not do. Because it's really hard, I think, to recover from a major cultural faux pas if you've done something that is like on like the very high, like top 3 things to never do in this country or with this group of people. It's very hard for, I think, those relationships to not have just a little bit of tension in them to the point where even if you do ask questions at that point, there might be a struggle to recover. And that's not to say you can't, because there's always ways to find grace and generosity emotionally between people. Because I think people in other cultures understand that your culture is foreign to them too.
Yeah, well, I think both integrating the emotional and the cultural intelligence seems essential for just effective global leadership. So I
Mm.
just want to thank you so much for highlighting that connection. I want to take a moment to thank you for even joining us today. And for the listeners that joined in, to read the full article, go ahead and follow the link below. Thank you so much, Jessie.
Nice speaker.